Hello, everyone, and welcome to our engineering webinar series. We hope that you, your family, and colleagues are as healthy as possible during these challenging times. My name is Michael Schwartz. I'm a senior customer consultant serving our corporate markets. It is my pleasure to introduce Kim Pierce, my colleague at Elsevier, who will talk to all of us today about Google Scholar limitations. Please write your questions in the Q&A queue, which we will then answer at the end of the session as time allows. But first, let's start with a few poll questions. First, have you used Engineering Village? And secondly, where do you typically search for engineering-related content? I'll stop the polling in a few seconds. Okay, and we will end that. So we are seeing, of course, that some of us are familiar with Engineering Village and some are not. And a lot of people are using both Google Scholar and Engineering Village. So it's a pretty good comparison for this presentation. So with that, let's get over to Kim. Thank you, Kim, and please go ahead.
Great, thank you, Michael, and thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. Today we're going to focus on the pitfalls of using Google versus ANI databases and other library resources. I'll primarily focus on Engineering Village as a comparison, but the items covered apply to all Elsevier platforms and likely to all of your library resources from other vendors as well. The focus here is to provide information that can be useful when needing to advocate for library resources within the current budget challenged environment, if you will. And while we can all agree that there are some really strong value arguments for using Google and Google Scholar, we're going to focus here on where Google falls behind library resources. And as a brief hello, and so that you know who is speaking, my name is Kimberly Pierce, and I'm an engineering customer consultant here at Elsevier. I have a background in conservation and policy as well as in geospatial science. And prior to coming to Elsevier, I had a pretty varied career in which I worked for both the United Nations, focusing on human and women's rights, and as a researcher using GIS systems to track and predict different vulnerabilities within coastal communities that are arising due to climate change. But here at Elsevier, I've been involved with Women in STEM and Engineering Employee Council initiatives, as well as helping to develop a set of best practices for user engagement. And my favorite part of this job is just hearing some of the innovative ways that folks are using our platforms. So now that you know a little bit about me, we're going to just quickly refresh on the pain points often cited in research and learning scenarios. So one of the primary pain points that comes up when speaking with our user communities is the concern over fake news and predatory journals. It's just no longer possible to blindly trust information, even scientific journals. And there's always this added component of needing to research the credibility and accuracy of any information. So depending on your informational needs and your projected timelines for any sort of project you're working on, the additional vetting of resources can really become quite cumbersome. This is especially considering that you also have to spend time and needed resources in finding the content that you then have to vet. So it's already this recurring pain point that's just being exacerbated. Searching for information is requiring time, and that often information seekers know how to effectively use more than one search engine. So you're not just going to Google, you're not just going to Engineering Village, you're often likely going to a combination of the two, which is something that we're seeing in this poll. You're going to need to constantly be keeping up to date on how to effectively use those platforms to make sure you're getting that accurate and up-to-date content. This is particularly challenging when you're looking to study within developing fields or with topics that are rapidly changing. And I think we're all living in a perfect example of that right now with COVID-19. But for medical researchers, there's not really a robust medical backlog of information like there is for other diseases. And, often they're going to be finding themselves in positions where information is changing so rapidly that what we know now is often not in line with what we knew way back in January. So in these emerging areas, getting a solid grasp of information is highly challenging. As a reminder, I'm going to be focusing here on Engineering Village, but the exploration of these pain points can really apply to a range of different library resources. One of the main questions you may find when working to secure budgeting for library resources is, why should I use this resource when we can use Google Scholar for free? And this question is really valid given the fairly robust offerings of Google. So let's take a minute to just explore this topic. When searching within Engineering Village, for example, users are accessing content that has already been vetted by real engineers so that you can trust that content to be reputable and peer-reviewed sources. Unlike in Google, when searching within Engineering Village, you don't have to worry about what you're missing out on information due to the algorithm learning your search preferences. So your users are getting exposed to engineering-specific content, and then they have the facets also that they can narrow down records with precision so that they're going to get that relevant content quickly. And that puts your results in context of your work and query needs without you needing to parse through it or draft a really complicated Boolean operator based search. There's also this prolonged lead time for adding content in Google Scholar, and that's going to really hinder gaining a full view of emerging topics. This is due to the method that content is added to the service. With Google Scholar, you're getting robots that are crawling the net and looking for uploaded content. And that can come from, on repositories that haven't been vetted. And there's also that risk, again, of predatory or fake journals. So in the era of fake news and information, it's now more important than ever to ensure that you're getting content access from reputable sources. And the way that Engineering Village combats this is by helping, by vetting the content for you and then adding that content in a timely fashion. So new content is actually being added on a weekly basis. So if you're going to be making this point when you're talking about budgets, how does Google Scholar then describe the criteria involved with indexing scholarly content? And according to Google and their inclusion guidelines, authors may simply upload their paper to their website and add a link to their publication with little other limitations. And that really starts to beg the question, where is this human evaluation? Where's that oversight and that quality assurance? If anyone can simply upload content, how then is it possible that you're going to be sorting through and finding that serious engineering work, especially when you're new to a topic? In comparison, you have Engineering Village, they have very strict content selection criteria, and it's extremely selective. So first, before you can even be considered for indexing within Elsevier, you do have to meet all of these minimum requirements that are highlighted in orange there. And that's even before you have the additional selection criteria, making sure that these minimums of quality are met. And just to highlight how the pain point of potentially inaccurate and fake information continues to permeate in these Google services, I just want to use one of my favorite tales of fake publishing. So way back in 2017, a writer at Discover magazine created this fake journal article with fake authors, fake resources, and different fake citations. And they based all of this content on the Star Wars universe. So like if you even note here, Lucas McGeorge and Anna Kim are authors of this fake article. And unfortunately, this fake article is still indexed within Google Scholar right now, despite being identified as a fake way back in 2017. So I took the screen grab yesterday by searching the article title. So you might say, oh, you search for the title, that doesn't really mean it's coming up in actual searches. except that it is, which is highly problematic. So without searching for the full title, the fake journal still appeared in top results and queries I just quickly put together. So just as a point of clarification here, I'm opting to show screen grabs instead of a live search, as Google learns your search patterns and adjusts what you see accordingly. It is my concern that if I keep, repeating this search when I'm practicing and so forth, I'm going to artificially make that fake journal appear higher in my results. So I definitely encourage you to go ahead and search this on your own to see what you get. But in this first search I ran here, this one here on the left, I just searched mitochondria and structure and function and clinical. So I created like a very basic Boolean there, and that led to the fake article showing up on that first page of results. So it's like number 9 for me. That's kind of rough. And so yes, you might want to say, oh, I searched a lot of the words within the title, but then when I just searched clinical relevance of mitochondria structure without any Boolean operators, just as an example of what a generalized query someone in the health field might search, the fake journal appeared in the middle of the second page of results. Now, considering that there are only 10 results per page, that puts a known fake article within my top 20 results of a generalized query. So the likelihood that a researcher inadvertently uses a fake that shows up in their top 20 resources is pretty high. This is just something to keep in mind when you're looking at your resources that you're offering and promoting, and when working with your user communities, informing them how to, find that best content of interest. This is also a really good, strong point that you can share with your decision makers and your budget makers when looking to reduce library and resource budgets, because it really speaks to the fact that predatory information is still a major issue. Moving along to our second pain point, search efficiency, we have a brief live look at a search for stress, which I'll show you in just a minute. But before we head to the internet, some main points to keep in mind in making your case for library resources is that Google and Google Scholar both lack precision searching and rely on the research savvy of the persons looking for information. So the Boolean operators within Google can yield phenomenal results, and we can't really downplay this point, but it does require that individuals know how to successfully craft those Boolean queries and have a solid grasp of a topic of interest. And even within the Google Scholar help pages, they're suggesting that you go to Wikipedia to get up to speed on a topic so that you can draft those searches. And I'll admit, I'll definitely be the first to admit that I use Wikipedia for a whole host of daily activities and my basic information needs, but I'm personally a little bit hesitant to use it in any sort of academic or corporate environment that would require my accuracy, especially given what we just saw regarding fake information. So another thing that you might want to keep in mind, especially when linking your library's resources to Google, is that this can work against libraries where budgeting decisions require a low cost per search. So using Google Scholar doesn't provide the same usage accountability in terms of document searches. So in Google, usage statistics are only created when a user clicks through to any content that you might have linked to it. However, if there's multiple copies of a PDF available, they do default to the publisher pages. So this is kind of creating a scenario where libraries that offer search resources, especially if those are ANI databases, they're going to miss out on that full view of user needs in terms of content coverage and subject area coverage. And in cases where it does default to the publisher, it's potentially preventing you creating a usage metric at all within your user community. So definitely encourage your users to click to the university and your company provided resources, and that will help ensure that you're getting those metrics that you may need in order to maintain your library budgets. So let me pop out of here really quick. And well, you see here, I've already done the stress for Engineering Village, but let me just redo the search here for stress in Google. So if I'm, a new engineer and I'm thinking I want to learn more about stress, and I just type in stress, when you come to Google, you're not really getting anything that's engineering specific. You're getting a lot of health and generalized symptoms. Oh, excuse me, my apologies. as well as, stress on your body. And then even if you go into Google Scholar and you search for stress, you're seeing stress in organization, men under stress, nothing really engineering specific. And so you can't even really look for facets to narrow that down because you really have just years. And then if you want to include patents and citations, so you would have to do stress and engineering or something along those lines to get something that's a little bit more engineering focused. But even here, it's cell viability being the first one. You're not really getting the quality of content that's engineering specific like you do when you come to a resource that's designed for that topic, such as Engineering Village. So you'll see when I've done stress, I'm also getting some suggested terms that I can add to this if I'm so inclined, as well as resources that are only regarding engineering topics. And then from here, if I needed to, I could limit to different years. You see here 2021, so I'm already getting articles in press for next year. And I can, I could add, if I wanted to do deformation and stress, I could do that. I could change some author affiliations, some countries, some document types. There's a lot of different ways that I could limit my results to narrow it down. So you see here, we're going from quite a lot to still quite a lot, but far more manageable, and our facets have updated in terms of what we could go ahead and search. So that's just very, very brief how you doing in terms of stress here. So we could even do, engineering stress over here in Google, and you're still not going to get the same tailored results. And then of course, every time I do this search, it is going to learn what I click and what I'm interested in, whereas Engineering Village is going to base those searches specifically on my query topics. Let me go back into this presentation really quick. So now that you've seen just a really brief search of how these results compare, another thing to note is that vendor platforms typically have additional search benefits. So two of the search features within Engineering Village that further help users find this information and data is, even if it's being indexed with various representations, are these searchable standards and numeric filtering features. And so these are particularly useful in prior art searching and are a strong competitor to Google's patent search, which we don't really have time to explore this afternoon. But I do encourage you to connect with your vendors periodically for train the trainer and refresher sessions, because that's going to enable you to stay up to date on some of the additional features that they add within their platforms. Our third and final pain point is finding relevant content within developing fields. And as we saw, Google doesn't really provide that robust option for whittling down your search results. Instead, you want to focus on Boolean operators and specific queries. So that's going to also limit your ability to quickly view trends. And this is one area where I find library resources really shine. So in Engineering Village, one of my favorite features is the trend charts. And those allow you to quickly visualize trends for topics and terms, publication year, author output, etc. And I'm going to show you that quickly, but I would suggest you play around with this. So in the past, I've hosted sessions for undergrads where we've covered how to use trends to assess research interest and advisors for grad school, but also how to find topics for term papers. So this feature is really only limited by your imagination. So if you have used it for a particular reason, or if you can think of an innovative use for these trends, please just let me know, because I'd really love to hear what you're coming up with. So in this search that we ran for defamation stress, if we wanted to get just a general idea of where this was going in terms of trends, we could even just look at this little bar chart icon over here. And what it's going to do is it's going to start showing us just how many things have been indexed within Compendex over the past few years. And so we can even look at this, past the past 60 years. So we can see, it used to not be the hottest topic back in the 20s, but it's really starting to pick up speed. So depending on what your research case is, this could be really interesting. You could also, if you weren't super sure about what was interesting to you in terms of stress or where you needed to be putting your attention, you could use that trends to look at different vocabulary and see where's the most work being done in terms of stress. So is it stress cracks? And you can see that, cracks are more, getting more publications than stiffness or flows. And so this could really give you an idea of what's hot, what's trending in terms of topics of interest. And of course, you can do that. You'll notice you can do that with anything. So author affiliations, you can see what competitors you have in terms of particular topics. So that's also very useful. And then just to quickly wrap it up, I'll take you to this page really quick. So we're going to talk about, keeping on top of those trends. This is just a quick view of what I'm going to show you here in our next slide. Apologies for the disjointed nature of going back and forth. As a reminder or an introduction, if you're not currently using these resources, Elsevier has a number of open access resources available to the public to help contact the coronavirus pandemic. And so these resources primarily focus on health and medical research, but there are resources available within Novel as well, which focus on engineering and disaster management and HVAC design. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you'd like more information regarding these resources or how to access them online. You can also, you can quickly access these by searching Elsevier free COVID resources or, Elsevier COVID Resource Center or any variety of those terms within our trusty but never so slightly faulted friend Google. So that's pretty much all we're going to cover today. I know it was a very quick, very hurried overview, but there's only so much you can do in 20 minutes. So what I'm going to do is say, Michael, if you could just wrap us up with our closing poll and any questions.
Thank you, Kim, for your presentation. And do check those questions, but I will first launch a final poll here. We'd just like to learn if you have found this session useful, and would you like to work with customer consultants to help inform your end users of how to utilize engineering resources? We'll give it a few more seconds. And we'll end that polling. Okay, so we thank everybody for finding this session useful. And we will, of course, just give you some contact information too. But I do see two questions that have come up before we end. So firstly, someone is asking here, Kim, hold on one second here. Let me find that question again. Oh, how does Elsevier determine whether any type of partner is removed? Can you just explain that again for us, and just that vetting process, and if there was an issue with a publisher?
Sure. So in terms of publisher content, let me go back to the slides. So in determining the criteria in order to be indexed, specifically in Compendex, these are what you need to do. You have to at the minimum, have a valid register ISS number for that journal. It also has to be peer reviewed. Abstracts have to be available in English. You have to be regularly having a publication come out. So it doesn't mean that it has to be every month or every few weeks, but if you are a yearly publication, for example, you have to make sure that you have something coming out yearly. So that really prevents people from making one-off journals. And you also have to have publication ethics statement and a digital preservation policy. So that just really prevents again, these predatory journals making, fake websites where they're just uploading content. So we do need to see that you have an ethics statement. And then once all of those minimum requirements are met, you're going to go into some different quantitative and qualitative selection criteria. So having that journal policy. So different types of peer review, and making sure that you have editors who are actually making sure that they're going into each journal article and being able to validate some of the information that's being, well, actually all of the information that is contained within a particular article and journal. And you want to make sure that abstracts are clear and that there's, a scope that the journal handles and it's adhering to its own guidelines, and that, quite frankly, that things are well written so that you're not just getting content that's kind of smashed together to meet deadlines. So I'm not sure if that clarifies some of the concerns that you're having, but in terms of like a predatory journal, if there's a journal that came out and it was discovered that it somehow made it into Compendex, but it was actually a fake, it would be removed. We are adding and removing any sort of content that might be inaccurate weekly, and removal of content within Compendexes is quite rare.
Thank you, Kim. One other question. I know that you work with a number of customers, but what would you say do you hear the most frequently used reason why Google Scholar is not preferred as you do your work?
Well, that harkens back to a lot of these pain points where the number one reason people shy away from Google Scholar is needing to reduce the time that they're searching and trying to validate content. So when you're using Engineering Village or library sources that are coming directly from publishers, that content's already having been vetted. So not to say that something could not fall through the cracks, but it's very, very unlikely. So with Engineering Village, for example, you're having people with actual engineering degrees who go through the content prior to it being indexed and making sure that it's all true, and that these publishers and journals that we are indexing are reputable. So that's one of the main concerns that people are having, especially now with, over the past few years, people trying to pad their citation counts by creating these fake articles where they're being cited. It can be a real problem with Google Scholar allowing anyone to just upload a PDF and link to that PDF and then having the content immediately come into Google Scholar. Also, if you read through some of their FAQs, if there is something that's flagged as being inaccurate or predatory, it can take between 6 to 9 months to address it. And I think that's, they never specify, it could just be a sheer volume issue there, but it does take quite a few months to remove any kind of content that's incorrect or predatory.
Thank you, Kim. If you can just bring up that final slide. So again, we thank you for attending today's session. The slide with the next session.
Sorry.
One more.
Hang on one quick second. Did it go? Nope. Oh, there we go.
There we go. We will be continuing our sessions on an every other week basis coming forward. The next session will be on October 15th, using Engineering Village in the classroom. If you would like information or an invitation to that session, please reach out to your customer consultant. If you don't know your Elsevier contact, please send either Kim or myself an email and we will send you that information. Our contact information is also being presented. And with that, thank you again for attending our session and have a pleasant day and week.